You are listening to Beyond the Verse, a Star Citizen podcast. A show dedicated to Cloud Imperium games, Star Citizen, and Squadron 42. Whether you fight, explore, unite, and or trade, we bring you news, updates, interviews, reviews, and analysis. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a pour of Radegast, and join us as we go Beyond the Verse.
Launch sequence activated.
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 31 of Beyond the Verse Star Citizen podcast. I'm your host, Solus, and today we are going through everything that has come out since the last episode. So last Friday we had a jump point 11:05. We're going to cover very briefly. Nothing really happened over the weekend. On Tuesday, we had the Pyro preview channel schedule. We had an update to it yesterday, which I will caveat and throw it in there as well. We had a surprise Galactapedia update, which goes into each of the planets and the people and then the locations that you need to know going into the preview channel and those in the future for Pyro. So that was really an exciting update. On Wednesday, JRDF and Star Citizen released the photos if you took a picture on the Dragonfly. So I'm going to show my ugly mug real quick as well, but talk about that experience and the quality of the picture and everything. I think that'll be a fun little caveat. We'll get into the roadmap roundup, the PU monthly report. The PTU 321.1 is now live again for the PTU, so we'll go over those patch notes. But first, we're going to get into some community engagement. So at the end of last week's episode, we have the Spotify Q&A, we have the polls. I tend to ask a lot of community engagement or polls on Twitter, so we'll go through those responses as well. But first, happy Halloween. I know it's November 2nd. We missed it by like 2 days, but I just want to say happy Halloween. I hope you got out and had a great time. I hope you and your family, if you have a family, if you have kids, I hope it was a remarkable experience for you. My kids, I always try to add like a personal touch to the podcast, but again, I have a 7-year-old son. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and they did like a last second pivot on me. My son was supposed to be Buzz Lightyear. And then he decided, because he has been Buzz Lightyear for like 5 out of the 7 years, he decided that he wants to wear last year's Iron Man costume. So it's too small, too short, but I'm like, hey, I don't really care, buddy. Yeah, as long as you're happy, let's try to throw that on you and we'll go have a good time. My daughter sort of did the same thing. She wore the dress that she was supposed to wear. It's the yellow Belle dress from Disney, and she decided it would be a good idea to identify as Aurora, which are probably one of the lesser known Disney princesses. I'm like, but honey, you're dressed as Belle. And she's like, no, Dad, I'm Aurora. Whatever you want, princess. You are beautiful. Go enjoy yourself. So that was just a funny little dynamic with the kiddos and getting out for Halloween. So with Halloween comes the change of season. So here in Austin, Texas, we're finally down in the 40s. So here's the deal. I am not sponsored. This episode is not sponsored by Navage. But if you struggle from allergies, may I just make a recommendation that you go and invest in Navage. That thing will clear you out. And I would treat it as a proactive measure, not necessarily reactive, because once you're jacked up, you're jacked up. But just to prove that they are not sponsoring me or anything that we're doing here today, I made a little slogan for them. So here we go. Ready? Don't be a waterboard yourself. And I mean that like 95% serious. It literally pushes. It's not gravity like the neti pot. It's not gravity. It literally pushes water through one nostril and it vacuums or it sucks the saline out in the other. It's quite the waterboarding experience. But if you can get past that, you will see colors that are not found in the rainbow coming out of your body. So I just want to encourage you, change the seasons, get out in front of it, try to survive. and you can never beat the bourbon. So a couple of episodes ago, and I'm going to go back to it, I try to throw in, my introduction says something about the Radegast, right, which is like the in-game whiskey of choice. I try to touch a little bit on like what I'm currently drinking. I'm a huge bourbon fan. I kind of consider myself a connoisseur, but there's smarter people out there than me. But I'm a huge bourbon fan. I'm a fan of the houses of bourbon. So I'm usually a Sazerac family fan, which is like the Buffalo Trace and Eagle Rare. Some of the more commonly known ones. But right now I'm drinking Angel's Envy. And I highly recommend Angel's Envy. It's on the more expensive side, especially the rye, which is what I'm currently drinking right now. And that's actually the Bacardi family. So here we go. Just real quick. This is the Angel's Envy rye. That's usually well over $100. But it's only like $80 at Specs. And so if you're from the South, I'm pretty sure it's a South thing. But if you're from the South, Specs is a phenomenal liquor store. It's huge. It's like the size of like an H-E-B, which is, I guess, another Southern reference, but it's a huge grocery store worth of just pure liquor. Highly recommend it. No, we don't condone alcoholism here on this podcast, but I usually try to drink like a bourbon while I game, which is kind of fun during Pyro. We'll get into why. You might want to start drinking when you play in Pyro, especially if you're not a PvP fan. But I usually try to drink like a bourbon throughout my podcast. It's the culture. It's the culture. It's kind of the environment that I want to foster in this conversation with you as you sit across the table with me. But what's funny is I started recording this podcast in the mornings. So like Thursday morning before Seattle wakes up, or Friday morning before Seattle wakes up. So before I actually start working. So I'm not going to drink bourbon at like 7 o'clock in the morning. So I'm moving on to Bang energy drinks in my nice marketed Beyond the Verse Yeti container, which I'm drinking Blue Raz right now. They're phenomenal. They don't taste like energy drinks, but that's also the problem. Because you drink them like they're not energy drinks. But this one's really good. It tastes like you're drinking like an Airhead, which is one of my favorite candies. So we've completely went off the rails for this podcast. I try to put like a personal touch on these things, and we're almost 15 minutes into the podcast, and we're not even started yet. So let's do this. Let's just get into it. Let's get into some of the polls. I'm gonna go straight into the Spotify polls. And so at the end of episode 30, Pyro, which we almost have 500 listens on that one episode alone, hands down, one of our most popular episodes. So if this is your first, go back and listen to episode 30. Basically, it was my response to CitizenCon, the experiences, the friends I've met. I shared pictures. So also watch it on YouTube if you would like. But the question I asked, what was the biggest news for you during CitizenCon 2953? And we had a couple of responses. So one thing, Spotify Q&A and Spotify polls, they're catching on. There's, I've been asking questions that haven't gotten any responses, and then finally we're starting to pick up momentum. But I'll tell you, Twitter is probably the best place for that engagement, for those questions. But again, question, what was the biggest news for you during CitizenCon 2953? One responder said the UI updates, and another responder, it's just metal, actually is a really common listener or a frequent listener. They respond with easily the base building, mainly because I was not expecting it to come as early as it was scheduled to. So UI updates, yes, absolutely. Those are going to be insane quality of life improvements, from the visibility out of the cockpit to walking from your ship to the underground facility, UGF, or the bunker. It's going to be a great overhaul. The map manipulation, they were showing the star map, they were showing their actual their HUD map that they were showing, where you can actually put it onto your screen, where you don't have to keep on hitting F2 2 to see your map. It's going to be a great update. Can't wait for it. You can plot your course. You can see like the best path to make it to your objective. It's just what it needed to have been like 5 years ago. So I agree with the UI updates. Back to that last response, base building. I still don't think it's going to happen next year. I know. Usually I am the white knight. Like usually I'm like, hey, everything's going to release in the next couple of days. I don't think base building is going to make it next year. And I want to be proven wrong. But they just broke ground on it. No pun intended, but they just broke ground on base building. It's a long way to go from breaking ground to something that is as good, if not better, than those games that are already doing it, and they're already doing it very well. So the one time I will say I'm tailoring my expectation for this. But yes, it was awesome to see it. It was awesome to see it in display or on display in CitizenCon. Moving on to the poll that we asked. So this got a couple extra votes. I asked which new ship release excites you more, and I asked about the A1 Spirit, the Zeus, or the Drake Cutter Scout. And the breakout is pretty much what I expected it to be. So in first place, getting 50% of the votes, was the Zeus Mark II. It of course looks sexy. It's an RSI, which is a fan favorite. It's not a polarizing fan favorite like Drake or Origin. Those are like the polar ends of the fan favoritism. I would say RSI, most people like RSI. It's the hallmark or the gold standard, I think, for ships. But the Zeus Mark II came in with 50% of the vote. The Drake Cutter Scout came in at 33.3% of the vote. And I think that's just because, one, it's more affordable. More people are going to obtain and own a Scout, but it also the play loop of scanning. Like everybody needs to scan. Everybody's going to need the reconnaissance, the map reconnaissance to do org missions. But the A1 Spirit is very singular in purpose. It's a bomber. You're going to bomb things. It's not even a good dogfighter. So if you're in space and you're PvPing with somebody else, I'm not exactly sure an A1 Spirit is a legitimate contender. So it's a very specific, and it's more expensive, but it's a very specific use case. And so that came in at 16.7%. So as always, I love polls. It's what I do. Most of y'all know this about me if you listen to this podcast. For the Twitter posts, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to change things up and give the YouTubers a little bit more of an aesthetically pleasing experience. But let's see here. First off, it's not a poll. It's actually a celebration. I want to take a second and highlight our October. Goodness, that was hard to say. Our October monthly show review, which I'm going to probably start calling it the listener experience. I'm a businessman, and so I think from an external business perspective, you could argue this is our value proposition. But from a legitimate who I am as a content creator, I think this is more about the celebration of the growth of our community, which I've been using hashtag #StarCitizenFam for, ever since we created this podcast. So I consider my community the Star Citizen Fam. But in 30 episodes across more than 35 countries, we experienced our largest growth month to date. A lot of it might have to do with CitizenCon and Pyro. The overall interest in Star Citizen is probably at a high point, a climax going into IAE November in the December months. It's probably typical around this time, but the interest has grown and we have seen the fruits of that labor. And so first off, thank you. If you're listening right now, if you're watching right now, of course you are why we're here today. In more ways than one, you're why I create this content. But our podcast is just under 4,000 plays. It's 3.7K podcast plays. And that's 30 episodes. You can do the math about how many plays per episode, but we will more than likely, we will hit over 4,000 plays with this episode alone. Super exciting. Now, YouTube, we've grown over 276 subscribers. Twitter, we are just under 800 followers. We're at 796 followers. TikTok, it's kind of slowed down a little bit. It was once our fastest growing platform, and now it's kind of I don't want to say plateaued. Last month we were at like 480 followers. Now we're at 542 followers. So still growing, still that, upward projection. And then Instagram is kind of the joke of the of the post. It's Instagram. I'm not on Facebook. I don't have it tying into Facebook, so maybe that's why. But Instagram is like right at 173 followers. I don't do a whole lot. In fact, the majority of what I do is video, and I still don't think Instagram is built around the reels. It's not really built around the pictures like a TikTok or a Twitter is. So I do more videos than I do still images. That might be, the why as well. But let me just stop real quick and again say thank you so much. Means the world to me. You are considered my family, my extended family. And again, I hope those of you that met me in CitizenCon see the legitimacy and the sincerity of that sentiment. So again, thank you. Not going to belabor it anymore. You know where my heart's at. Really do appreciate it, y'all. So for the first poll, this was back, does this have dates on it? Yeah, October 28th. All right, so here we go. On October 28th, this poll got 5.3 thousand views, 515 votes. So it got a lot of attention. The question, basically, Pyro preview channel. Again, this was back on October 28th. We knew that on Tuesday, October 31st, they were going to release their preview channel. And to a select few, those that had purchased the digital goodies pack, those that were concierge level, and those that were the most active testers. My question very specifically was, if selected, do you plan on leaving the PU and PTU to fully focus on their preview channel? And I made a caveat for this poll, no, you cannot flex dynamically between platforms. So the answers, it was actually kind of surprising. It was surprising to me. One, I gave the option for the PU only. I gave the option for PTU for 322, which actually is 321.1, fair. And then obviously the Pyro preview channel. I'm going to cough real quick. The breakout, it was two-thirds Pyro preview channel. So 66.2% said if they were selected, they were going to dedicate their entire time gaming with the Pyro preview channel. And then 17.7% said they would stay in the PU only, and the remaining 16.1% said that they would go into the PTU for 322. That seems kind of obvious to me. So in the past, anecdotally, you are either a PTU advocate or you're a PU only advocate. There's like very little wiggle room. Again, anecdotally, with my experience with the people that I engage with on Twitter, on my stance again has been like, I'm here to play the alpha, which is the persistent universe. Playing in the PTU feels like an alpha to an alpha. So I have always struggled with justifying going into the PTU to have it all erased, to then go into the PU to have that all erased when the next patch comes out. It's almost like insult to injury. Again, this is my own personal opinion, my own personal experience. So this was the one breakaway. It's Pyro. I mean, you're basically in 4.0, and they need this. CIG needs us to go in and break the shit out of Pyro. Challenge accepted. I will go and find ways to break the damn thing. But it has been a great time. I was blessed to be able to participate and still participating in the Pyro preview channel. It's been a great time. But again, 2/3 of us, 515 votes. 2/3 of that chose the Pyro preview channel. So I think it's a really good dialogue, honestly. Phenomenal dialogue. Still sharing my screen straight into the next poll. 3 days later, on October 31st, for those of us who did get accepted, my next question was your starting location. So this to me was a surprise. I was actually surprised that we would have more options than Checkmate Station. Right, which is what we had at CitizenCon. I truly thought it was going to be the CitizenCon experience just for more people, and that's not the case. We'll actually get into it here in the next couple of minutes on what the actual experience is, but you have the option of choosing the 4. You have Checkmate, Obituary, Starlight Service Station, and Patch City. So you have those 4 options to choose from. Now, okay, so the responses, 1.2 thousand views, 119 votes, the majority choosing checkmate, 35.3%. The next was Patch City, 27.7%, then Starlight Service Station, 21%, and then Obituary at 16%. So I had a hard time with this. I knew checkmate because I played it in CitizenCon, but I didn't have any intel on the other 3 locations. I knew I wanted to do something different because I had already seen checkmate. So I literally I read the little descriptions. So, whenever you're in the loading screen or right before the loading screen, you choose, I think it's the server. I think it's your starting location, your residence, and then your server, like best US, EU, whatever. Anyways, in that moment, that's when I chose, I read those little descriptions and I chose Starlight Service Station for no other reason than it sounded like more my style. But I have since been to all 4 of the start points, and they're relatively the same. Obviously, locations are different around the Pyro, system, obviously, but they all have the same feel, right? They have the same kind of lawless, rough and ready. You have gang markings on the walls and tags everywhere. It's like that's pretty much the same. I think the most interesting comment in that poll was some people chose Patch City because of the irony of the name, because it's in a patch. It's patch 4.0. I thought that was a really brilliant way to decide where they started their location. So I thought that was cool. Well done there, community. And then my last poll, this actually sparked a lot of conversation. So maybe not as much views as the first poll. So 2.5 thousand views, 378 votes. But there was a dialogue happening on Twitter that I wanted to just see where the community was at holistically. And so I'll ask the question, or I'll state the question, and we'll kind of discuss what is being deliberated. Will Pyro's lawlessness bring out the worst in the Star Citizen community? Vote, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And I said this will absolutely be a topic on this week's Beyond the Verse podcast. Okay. So there's a couple of content creators that have taken screenshots of general chat where there are gamers mad at each other because they were, for no reason, shot out of space. They were walking to get their package on planet side and were shot there on planet side. And so there's this, I'm going to report you to CIG because you're killing people for no reason. But the general sentiment in response to that is, this is Pyro. Like, this is a lawless system, lore-wise, and by design. This is a lawless system. There are no crime stats. You'll have your satellite registry, so like what you're doing is being recorded, and you know that piece. But there's no crime stats. Like you can just shoot people out of the sky for no reason. And so people are defaulting, and I'm actually guilty of this. I'm one of these individuals. People are defaulting to just shooting first, asking questions later. I was doing a delivery mission going to Bloom. I think Bloom was the name of the planet. I was going to Bloom, going down to a derelict site, and there were like 3 red chevrons. I'm like, okay, let's go. I'm just going to start shooting. I'm not going to take my Phoenix Emerald and run the risk of landing and dying into these 3 red chevrons. So I just started opening up fire, and it was a phenomenal dogfight. It was great. But being in a Phoenix, which is a constellation, keep your distance. You're going to win that 99% of the time because you're hitting hard, and you're hitting hard with a lot of rounds. So I don't know. There was a lot of kind of controversy, in a good way, like a healthy controversy around the community of like, man, Pyro is going to be hard if you're not into the PvP. So here's the response. So I gave 2 options. All is fair in war, and then I'll avoid Pyro. Now those are very polars. There's no flexing between the two. Those are very polar opposite answers by design. I didn't want a Likert scale of like how people are feeling. Just, are you for it or against it? And so 77% of 378 votes, 77% voted all is fair in war. So they welcome it. They're up for the challenge, while 23% said avoiding pyro. I think somebody in the thread said it best. Pyro's huge. Pyro is absolutely massive. If you think flying from like Area 18 to Microtech, which I'm pretty sure is the furthest distance right now in Stanton, it might be Crusader and Microtech. Regardless, if you think like 35 million kilometers is a long ways, wait until you get into Pyro. That system is incredibly large. And so even with this like very small sample size that are actually playing in Pyro right now, it takes me forever to find anybody, unless you're at like a station, Checkmate or Starlight. Unless you're at a station, you're going to see other people. But flying around from planet to planet or asteroid field to asteroid field, I don't know. It's not a problem yet. It's not. And then you also have to consider, like, fast forward to a point where Stanton and Pyro are, basically out at the same time and you're flexing between systems. You have to have a very deliberate reason to go to Pyro. You're going to Pyro because of something lawless. They might have the best materials or the best way to garner, some materials. But then at that point, you also have to then consider, how's that any different from any other game? Right? So the more valuable materials are gated behind a raid, or they're gated behind a dungeon or trial or some sort of, overland objective that you have to complete, right? Time trial, etc. So here you go. Pyro, if that's going to be a location with all this rare materials and kind of the best ways of, getting money, whether it's like drugs or whatever, it probably should be a little bit harder. So maybe think of Pyro as like a PvP system. Maybe think of it that way. But it's so large, you're not going to run into anybody anytime soon. And then the last piece, which I kind of already just said, just get your mind right. It already happens in Stanton. Like that kind of griefing, quote unquote, it's going on in Stanton. It's just less because of the crime stats, and some people don't want to have to go through the Klesher loop and to get out of prison, etc. It's already happening, but for the most part, people are there to accomplish their, objectives. Again, for the most part. This is also an encouragement to join an organization. So you're speaking to an org owner, Sole Provision. You're more than welcome to join us. We are based around like transportation and transport of the goods and trade and all that. So if the distribution center's announcement during SitCon was appealing to you, come join us at Sole Provision. But join an org. I don't even care if it's us. Join an org and do this with friends. Pyro is probably your friend location. Hey guys, I'm about to take off. I'm about to go to Pyro. I need to get XYZ. Who can accompany me with their F8C or, with their Arrow or Gladius? And then go with a squad. Go have fun. Like, that's the best way to play Star Citizen anyways, is with friends. So, all right, I think that's a great segue into finally the news of Star Citizen. So last Friday, there was the Jump Point release, and for some reason, it just deleted my link that I had up. So stand by. Jump Point available. Okay. So I'm just going to read the little description. I'm going to allow y'all to go through Jump Point yourself. It's going to take up too much time on this podcast to go through each page. But for the subscribers, Jump Point 1105, or the October edition, came out last Friday. Quote, attention subscribers, welcome to the October issue of Jump Point. This issue takes a look back at this year's CitizenCon and some of the amazing content that was shared. We went to Pyro, joined the ranks of Squadron 42, caught up with the RSI Polaris, saw the future of human hygiene, met new gangs, glimpsed the lesser-spotted Stormwall, rethought our inner thoughts, jousted and disengaged, and much, much more. There's a lot of information jam-packed into this jump point, but I think since we kind of try on this podcast to kind of look forward and kind of see kind of the so what or what we can expect in the future out of things, the very last page gave kind of a glimpse of IAE and what the potential colors will be. And I'm actually doing this live. I'm going to go into, you hear my clicking, I apologize. I'm going to go into this jump point. Then I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. What? This is awesome. Cool. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen, and then let's get down to the last page. So, yeah, there's a lot of information about the Zeus and how things are laid out. Actually, while we're here, the Zeus, and I just went right to it. That was perfect. The bottom left image is why I purchased the Zeus MR, which is like the bounty hunting variant. And so this bottom left image shows, it's not an Ursa rover. It's not a gray cat. Dang it. A cyclone. It shows a cyclone parked in the cargo bay of this ship. And so when I first saw the Zeus, I thought it was first off smaller than what it is. I thought it was smaller. It almost looked like just maybe a little bit larger Titan. And so when I saw the bounty hunting version that has an EMP, a quantum dampener, I thought like the Titan Warlock, which I used to have, but you can't really do much else with it. It's very singular in purpose. Well, seeing this, it's significantly larger than the Titan Warlock, but you can also put ground assets in the back, which means box missions, which means you can do other things with this ship than just deploying an EMP generator or quantum dampener or prison cells for the bounty hunting missions. So this image alone was why I spent the money and got one. But the reason why I wanted to pull this out, this is the first kind of image that we have for IAE. So there's on the last page, IAE, the color scheme is very obvious. It's purple and white. And so there was a lot of screen grabs and mentions on social media like, hey, is this the best in slot color scheme for your ships? No one's denied it. In fact, Tyler Whitkin said you should be looking forward to the best in slot paint to that post. So there's a good reason to believe that the paint scheme going into BIS or going into IAE for the best in show paint is going to be something based around purple, which is great. I welcome very high vibrant colors because it makes it easier for me to kill you. It's easier to pick you out in space when you stand out like a Smartie, a piece of candy, Smartie, like Halloween reference, my bad. All right, let's keep going. So that was Jump Point. Spend time. There's a lot of pages. It's like, I think 20 or 30 pages. It's long. It's a long Jump Point. Good information, though. We are finally about 35 minutes into the podcast. We are finally into This Week in Star Citizen. So let's share the screen. Let's get going. Happy Monday, everybody. Here we go. We want to take a moment to once again thank everyone for making CitizenCon 2953 truly special. The reactions are still coming in, and we couldn't be more proud of what we've built together. Between connecting with you all at the event and the tidal wave of positivity coming out of it, our batteries are fully charged and ready to rock. Meaning Bonnie Merchantman in the next quarter. We're sure you felt the electric post-show energy, which we're feeling internally at the studios as well. While we're all smiles and celebrating, we're focused and more determined than ever to deliver the exciting features and content you saw last weekend. In case you missed the announcement at SitCon, this Tuesday we're opening the Preview channel, a new channel where we will deploy and test new underlying technology in an isolated environment to protect the reliability and playability of the live servers. To debut the preview channel, select pilots should prepare for their first expedition to Pyro starting tomorrow. Lastly, tomorrow's the last day to submit for the 60 Seconds of Horror Machinima. I don't know what this word is. Contest. Your submissions have been amazing so far. So if you got one cooking, make sure to submit it on the community hub or TikTok by 11:59 p.m. Pacific on October 31st. So we're past that deadline. We already went through what is going to come out for this week. So let's get into the Pyro preview channel. So this was sent on October 30th, but we have an update immediately sent, maybe like a day or two afterwards, by Tyler. So the Pyro preview channel initially came out with this schedule. It's basically October 31st through November 14th, and it's a rolling server. So it goes like from the US servers to EU servers to APAC, and it's US, EU, APAC, US, EU, APAC, and it just rotates. It doesn't mean if you're in the US you can only play that one day. It just means that the active servers you can play on are on those days. So you might have a better experience if you're in the US like me. You're gonna have a better experience playing on October 31st, November 3rd, November 6th, because again, those are closer clientele. Closer clients to the server. There was a change though. So the next day or two, Tyler comes out and says, hey, there's this preview. What I've noticed, what I looked really quickly through, I think they're just taking days off of the Pyro preview channel. So instead of the 14th, it now ends on November 10th. And there's not really an explanation as to why, but we knew that this was going to be a dynamic event anyways. We knew that things were going to change. We knew that expectations, were going to change. But here you go, October 31st through November 10th. It's still US, EU, APAC, and it just rotates, between all those countries. So I don't know if there's anything else I want to get into about the Pyro preview channel. I am trying to be like maybe sensitive or like acknowledge that the majority of people are not in the preview channel. But if you want to go and see pictures and videos, every content creator is just flooding Twitter with everything that you possibly can imagine. But my initial reactions, I think that's probably more important for a podcast. My initial reactions is like overwhelmed in a good way. It's just so big. It's such a big system that traveling from, again, like in SitCon, traveling from Checkmate Station to Monox, I mean, it was like a good 5 minute, like I was sitting in my Cutter Scout at that time, wow, this was like the system next to me, and it took a long time to get there. So that's going to add a lot of dynamics to quantum drive fuel. It's not like you're going to be able to take a little pea shooter out there like an Archimedes and go from like one end of Pyro to the other, which I think it's realistic, quote unquote. I think that's actually a really awesome dynamic to consider. So that's really cool. The images are beautiful. The planets are stunning. The derelict sites are like, it's not the bunkers or UGFs, but like the sites that you go to, like the mining facilities in Stanton, their counterparts in Pyro, amazing, absolutely amazing. There's so much detail. There's so much like just more stuff, more decorations than what you see in Stanton. So they have spent a lot of time. They have spent, I'll go back to saying like a lot of time. It's just like the breadth of everything that they've been able to accomplish and the level of detail. I sent a picture yesterday on social media of the shops inside of Starlight. It's not your typical, shop that you see in Stanton. It looks like a ran down kind of trademark, like you would, what's a good example? Like a market. Yeah, it's like a market. You show up and there's like baskets of like rifles inside, not behind a locked case or anything. You've got jackets and helmets hanging from ceilings, kind of like stuck on walls. They nailed it. they nailed the cosmetics and the overall feeling of Pyro. So I love everything about it. There's solar flares. That's a thing. So as you're flying, your ship starts freaking the F out. It's like detecting that there's going to be a solar flare. So if you're walking around planet side and that happens, you're in trouble. It's going to hurt a little bit. But you find cover. Like, you're supposed to find cover, go into a cave or go into a building and you'll be fine. But there's a whole dynamic of survivability there where the environment is also out to get you. So if it's a person, if it's not a person trying to shoot you down playing the piracy loop, it's the freaking sun in Pyro that's trying to take you out. So my impressions, my reaction, like, it's been a lot of fun. Cannot wait. We got a couple more days left. At the time of recording, it's November 2nd. We have 8 more days to really get in and have fun in Pyro. So super excited about that. More to come. Obviously, our next episode is the day before it ends. So we'll probably have like a recap, last impressions before it goes away. Which, by the way, next week's episode will more than likely be tailored around IAE, as the end of the month is all things IAE. Okay, that gets us into the Galactapedia update. Let me cough. All right, the Galactapedia update. Again, this was a surprise. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for those of you on YouTube, but we did not see this coming. It was not in the This Week in Star Citizen announcement on Monday. This just came out with the preview channel, and I love it. I absolutely love it. I wasn't able, of course I work, so I wasn't able to immediately jump in at like 2 p.m. on Tuesday whenever the roster went out or the email went out. But the Galactapedia did, and so I was able to like at least read about the lore. I was able to read about what Pyro is and all that. So I want to spend a couple of seconds to get into the Galactapedia update, and then the rest of the show, we have the Dragonfly pictures that'll go very quickly, the 321.1 PTU patch updates, and then the roadmap roundup, and that'll be the show. So Galactapedia update. I'm just going to read it from the article, and then we'll get into the full-length article, and I will more than likely go through the majority of these short articles. So I think it's worth it. This is the news. The news right now in Star Citizen is all things Pyro. So I'm okay taking time out of the podcast to go through the Galactapedia. So full-length article. Let's go to the Pyro system. As you can see, there's just a lot, guys. There's 6 planets, right? Jump point connections. I think there's like 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, 7 jump point connections, 6 planets. The locations obviously are more, as there's asteroid belts and all that. So here we go. Pyro system. The Pyro system is an unclaimed planetary system that consists of a K-type flare star, 5 terrestrial planets, and a gas giant. Discovered in 2493 by Pyrotechnic Amalgamated, it was not claimed by the UNE, due in part to the dangers surrounding its star. Instead, it was exploited by corporate interests until the 2560s, when the potential resources extracted from the system stopped outweighing the increased cost of maintaining equipment under a volatile sun. Pyro became a haven for outlaws by the early 2600s. Today, it is mostly populated by criminal factions that frequently struggle against one another for dominance. In 2947, extremist group Xenothreat seized control of Ruin Station, making them the de facto leaders of the Pyro system. Planetary system. Pyro, the system's star, is roughly 11.3 billion years old. It is classified as a flare star or a variable star that undergoes dramatic increases in brightness within a few minutes, releasing powerful bursts of radiation. The closest planetary body to it is Pyro 1, a terrestrial planet with a dense atmosphere and a silicate crust. Of the other terrestrial planets, Bloom, Pyro 3, is the only one with naturally habitable conditions. Monox, Pyro 2, has enough oxygen in its atmosphere to allow a person to breathe without protective equipment for only a short time before deadly health consequences set in. Well, that's nice. Those who visit the surface of Terminus, Pyro 6, can breathe there for long periods of time, but not comfortably. The gas giant Pyro 5 has 6 true moons. The planet Pyro 4, which was likely knocked out of its original orbit around the star by a massive celestial body, now circles Pyro 5 as its 7th and outermost moon. Which I think of everything. They really do. The narrative team thinks of everything. Like, that's such an interesting detail, to be a moon for Pyro 4, but then it becoming a moon for Pyro 5. I wonder if there's like lore behind that. What was the celestial body that knocked it out? Interesting. Discovery. In 2463, the watch officer of the Earth flag tanker ship Rustabout, Raj McEwen, detected a strange signal in the Cano system. He conducted an analysis and compiled his findings into a detailed report, which he sent to the owners of the ship, Pyrotechnic Amalgamated. The board of directors chose to take no action at that time. In 2493, CEO Cecile Uchiha ordered that legacy flight records be reassessed to factor in advances in jump point detection technology. McEwen's original report was found during this review, and the company dispatched an exploration ship to the region. After careful investigation, they discovered a jump point at McEwen's coordinates and entered it to find what would later be named the Pyro system on the other side. History. Pyrotechnic Amalgamated celebrated the discovery until surveys revealed the existence of the flare star. Although scans of Pyro 2 had found valuable mineral deposits, the unpredictable bursts of radiation from the system's sun would make their extraction with the technology of the day a costly endeavor. The company made the decision to report the discovery to the UNE, planning to collect government subsidies that would fund their operations and guarantee future projects. Uchiha personally that name's throwing me off. Uchiha personally reported news of the discovery, and Pyrotechnic Amalgamated was granted first crack at the system when the UNE opened it for commercial activity. While the UNE gave corporate interests like Pyrotechnic Amalgamated the green light to enter Pyro, they held back on allowing full colonialization. The flare star presented a completely unknown quantity, one that could have disastrous effects on human life. Government officials elected to conduct a voluntary 10-year pilot program that would document the effects of the star's flares on humans. If the conclusion of the study was favorable, they would sanction colonization, and officially claim the system. However, the program became one of many that were cut short in 2499 when Project Far Star located the Magnus system, and the Senate voted to channel all possible resources to the terraformation of Magnus 2 and the construction of a new center of shipbuilding for the UNE Navy. In 2516, when more funds might have become available, the discovery of the Terra system funneled any available capital towards the development of the naturally habitable Terra 3. In 2523 brought the advent of the United Planets of Earth, and along with it, a complete reorganization of the government. The question of what to do with Pyro was put on indefinite hold, and the system remained unclaimed. Over the next few decades, commercial interest in Pyro waned as valuable minerals became thin on the ground and government subsidies dried up. After the end of the First Tavaran War, improvements in shielding technology allowed the few companies that remained in the system to extend their operations to previously unreachable areas, but this also increased the presence of outlaws as they too gained access to this tech. Eventually, bandit raids made turning a profit impossible. Some companies were forced to declare bankruptcy, including Pyrotechnic Amalgamated. By the end of the 2500s, almost all corporations had pulled out of Pyro, paving the way for outlaws to become the dominant force in the system. The last section, culture. Instead of having formal organized government, competing gangs rule over the Pyro system, creating a series of fiefdoms that are subject to change if the local dominant faction is ousted from power. Gangs that hold particular strategic points are seen as more powerful than others, especially those who control Ruin Station and the drug labs within it. Many gangs maintain strongholds on the surface of Terminus, the planet the station orbits, that they use as launching points for attacks. Outside of its criminal organizations, Pyro maintains a moderate population of mostly human inhabitants whose main occupation is survival. Monox's mining infrastructure, long abandoned by its former owners, houses squatters who will fiercely defend their right to live there in spite of its hostile environment. Those who live on the naturally habitable Bloom have an easier existence, but still struggle day to day. Joining a gang and attaining its protection is largely seen as a way of attaining a better life, and many choose this path if it's made available to them. Still, numerous others refuse the option, preferring the known risks of subsistence, living over the constant dangers associated with gang membership. The end. So Pyro, it's really interesting. There's no crime system, but there's definitely an understood pact or an understood law. And like they said, it's dynamic. It could go from one gang to the next gang. And I like that. They speak about the fiefdom. It's like a hierarchy. It's almost think like back in the day of like the medieval times. The law was whatever the castle set up, right? So it's just it's very different. It's very, very, very different than Stanton. And so if they were going to release a second system, here's like a whole nother debate. If they were going to release a second system, you want it to be the antithesis of Stanton, right? A whole different experience that welcomes a whole different set of game loops and game styles, of course. And then with future subsequent systems, it can kind of blend in and kind of be somewhere in between of the two. I think that's perfect. I think how they approached like the next system being Pyro, I think is perfect. I love what they're doing with this system. Random coughing, which I've kicked most of that. If you've been watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, there was a couple of episodes, like 5 in a row, that I basically died in each one of those. I think I'm doing a lot better now. I hope so anyways. So there is your Pyro system update. The rest of these are short articles. They're going to go very quickly, but I want to go through every single one of them. So let me go through, click all these windows so they can go ahead and load. Y'all can hear me clicking, and let's go. All right, so we're just going to go quickly. I'm not going to keep flipping screen shares. We're just going to get straight into this. And it looks like I'm uploading too many windows because I'm getting error messages now. All right, Pyro 1. Pyro 1 is the first planet from the sun of the Pyro system. Its thick, high-pressure atmosphere hides a strange landscape beset by powerful winds and lightning strikes. That's cool. Under the clouds, there's an ecosystem of plants and animals that endure its extremely high temperatures, even during powerful solar flares. Surveyors and scientists constructed shielded research centers and mining outposts on Pyro 1's surface starting in 2510, allowing a sparse population to attempt to utilize the planet before the facilities were abandoned by the close of the 26th century. Monox, Pyro 2. Monox Pyro 2 is the second planet from the sun of the Pyro system. Nicknamed Monox for the deadly carbon monoxide in its atmosphere, it has a temperate climate and was seen as a viable candidate for terraforming shortly after its discovery. However, its proximity to the system's volatile sun made it dangerous for human habitation, and the UNE refused to clear it for terraformation, instead allowing corporations to harvest its natural resources. Undeterred by the potential risk, outlaws eventually took up residence on the planet when the last corporations pulled out of Pyro in the 26th century. Alright, so I got a maintenance error on this other window. Reloading it worked. The Akiro Cluster, or the Pyro Cluster Alpha, is a defense asteroid cluster on the Pyro system. Situated in the L5 Lagrange point of Monox, the asteroids periodically move closer to Monox or further away from it as they travel around their sun. Most were stripped of their most valuable minerals by Pyrotechnic Amalgamated and other companies, but some small mining outfits have been known to search the cluster for undiscovered troves. Cool, let's keep going. I'm going to refresh this. Hopefully it loads. Bloom. There we go. Bloom, or Pyro 3, is the third planet from the sun of the Pyro system. Cold but naturally habitable, it became the epicenter of mining endeavors on Pyro. Pyrotechnic Amalgamated and other corporations constructed multiple staging sites, employees' barracks, and processing centers that were in use until the cost of their maintenance could no longer be offset by mining profits. Abandoned when the last active corporations in Pyro ceased operations there in the late 26th century, they were claimed by squatters, outlaws, and former miners who lacked the means to return to the UEE. Pyro 4 is the outermost moon of Pyro 5, and astronomers theorize that it was once the fourth planet from the sun of the Pyro system. At some point before humans discovered Pyro, a massive celestial body collided with Pyro 4, catastrophically warping its landscape, destroying its atmosphere, and knocking it into the orbit of a nearby gas giant Pyro 5. Although the tectonic activity that resulted from this impact has quieted and a new atmosphere is formed, Pyro 4 is far from stable. It is on a long, slow collision course with Pyro 5 and will one day either crash into it or break up into a ring. I can see that being like an expansion or like an event 5 years, 10 years down the road. I can see them doing something with this dynamic. Pyro 4 hitting Pyro 5, it becomes an asteroid belt, and there is some sort of raid that needs to take place in the area. I love it. They're setting up possibilities of future content. Love it. And we kind of just discussed it, but Pyro 5 is the fourth planet from the sun of the Pyro system. It was given the classification of Pyro 5 when researchers came across strong evidence that its outermost moon once maintained a stable orbit around the system star between Pyro 3 and Pyro 5. When Pyro 4 was struck by an unknown celestial body, it was knocked into Pyro 5's gravitational sphere of influence. Residents of and travelers through the Pyro system are known to harvest hydrogen from Pyro 5's green and yellow atmosphere. Ooh. I'm getting like so many error messages from just clicking through everything. Ignis, or Pyro 5 Alpha, is the innermost moon of the gas giant Pyro 5. The canyons and dry riverbeds on its surface suggest that liquid water once flowed there in the distant past. Its frigid average temperature and deadly atmosphere, sulfur dioxide, creates an unfriendly environment for those who lack proper protective equipment. Nonetheless, the moon sometimes sees visitors seeking to resupply their air reserves thanks to the small amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. The Vatra. I've never seen Vatra or Pyro 5 Bravo. So this is the first time seeing that name. It's the second moon from the gas giant Pyro 5. Its thick, high-pressure atmosphere of nitrogen and methane supports an ecosystem of plants that subsist on hydrocarbons instead of carbon dioxide. Some water is present on Vatra in the form of ice, but it's too cold on the surface for it to exist in a liquid state. Travelers who have harvested this ice in emergency situations report that, when melted, it is extremely bitter. As y'all know from the last episode, I've started reading The Expanse, and then actually started watching The Expanse on Amazon Prime. And like you would know, ice is a commodity that they are selling, or that they're mining. I wonder if ice will become like a game loop in Pyro or in Star Citizen period, but this would be a very optimal place, right, to go and harvest your ice. Let's go. A deer. Yeah, I'm gonna say a deer. It's the third moon from the gas giant Pyro 5. Jagged mountains and rocky hills dominate its crater-ridden landscape. Because it lacks a protective atmosphere that would otherwise break apart most approaching celestial objects, its surface sees frequent impacts. The air is permeated with fine particles of dust that are generated during these events. Pharaoh, or Pyro 5 Delta, is the fourth moon from the gas giant Pyro 5. A hotbed of seismic activity, Pharaoh experiences frequent earthquakes that disturb its deep oceans of brackish water. The moon has an unusual ecosystem that thrives both on the surface and under the sea, supported by the carbon dioxide and nitrogen in Pharaoh's dense atmosphere. It didn't say anything about going underwater, but I will literally have a hard time playing this game if there is ever any Subnautica moments. There's something like, I don't know, in space you at least have like stars and gas clouds. Sometimes my thalassophobia will kick in, like the gas clouds we saw going in those jump points. But going from space through an atmosphere, and like you come out of the clouds right at the water surface, and then you dive into the water of just pure blackness. I don't know. That would be a game loop I would probably avoid. For some reason that terrifies me. But seeing a Galactapedia update mentioning like the deep oceans of brackish water, nope, not happening in my world or my game loop. All right, Fuego. Fuego is the fifth moon from the gas giant Pyro 5, relatively temperate but still cold. It has a mostly carbon dioxide atmosphere with small percentages of nitrogen, sulfur dioxide, and oxygen. High amounts of iron sulfide in its soil gives its surface a yellow and black appearance. Infamous smuggler group headhunters often utilized Fuego as a stash point for goods during their nascent years in the early 2600s. I've actually never seen that word either. Nascent, nascent. I'm gonna say nascent. Give me a second. Alrighty. If you're on YouTube, you see me drinking. If you're on podcast, you're like, why does he keep getting quiet? I'm gonna like drink. My throat's bothering me. All right, so Vuur, Vuur, Vuur is the sixth moon from the gas giant Pyro 5. Thanks to an increased greenhouse effect in its dense carbon dioxide atmosphere, it is unusually warm for a moon so distant from its sun. Its carbon-rich soil supports forms of vegetation that utilize crystalline carbon in their base structures. Before the system was overtaken by outlaws in the early 27th century, these plants were a popular subject of research among botanists. Terminus, Pyro 6, is the outermost world of the Pyro system. I gotta go check this out. I think it'd be really cool to see Terminus. Its nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere is technically breathable, but contains high amount of methane, has high enough amounts of methane and carbon dioxide that it has a negative effect on one's health after extended exposure. Makes total sense. Pyrotechnic Amalgamated placed their main hub of operations in orbit around Terminus, later abandoning the station when they left the system. Now nicknamed Ruin Station, it has become a flashpoint for power struggles in Pyro. Terminus's proximity to the station has made it the site of frequent clashes between gangs. Yeah, I need to make a trip out to Terminus, and I need to make a trip out to Ruin Station. Absolutely. I think within the next 7 days, for sure. All right. Ruin Station is a space station that orbits Terminus Pyro 6 in the Pyro system. Pause. Seeing Ruin Station come to fruition is very special for me. If you've been watching 31 episodes of Beyond the Verse, you know that I go through the roadmap updates. I dive into those details, whether I go into the 30 pages and talk about it on the podcast or just discuss the roadmap roundup. Know that I have read every word from every single roadmap update ever. It is something I love diving into, and you would see Ruin Station pop up very frequently throughout roadmap roundups and updates. And so updates to Ruin Station, capabilities of Ruin Station, artwork in Ruin Station. So seeing it come to fruition is a very special moment. I think they've kept the rest of Pyro under like lock and key. You didn't have a lot of intel going into Pyro, but Ruin Station was constantly mentioned. Back to the article. Constructed by Gold Horizon for Pyrotechnic Amalgamated in 2512 as the company's new base of operations, the station, then known as McEwen Station, served as the main processing point of exports from Pyro and saw continual use for decades. When Pyrotechnic Amalgamated declared bankruptcy in 2563, the company decided to abandon the station instead of bearing the cost of decommissioning it. It was shortly thereafter claimed by outlaws, who gave it its current nickname. Today, Ruin Station is Pyro's main hub of drug manufacture, black market sales, and other criminal enterprises. It has been the site of many major power struggles between rival gangs. Extremist organization Xenothreat has been in control of the station since 2947. Pyrotechnic Amalgamated. I'm actually going to skip this. There was a jump point several jump points ago that had a long article about Pyrotechnic Amalgamated, and we did cover it here on this podcast. So for the sake of like trying to shave off where we can to wrap up this hour-long podcast, let's go ahead and move on. Citizens for Pyro. Citizens for Pyro is a civilian non-profit organization that hopes to expand the non-outlaw population of the Pyro system until it has a stable enough community for the UEE to finally claim Pyro as its own. Madge Hartford originally established the organization in 2950, that's just 3 years ago in the universe, with the goal of eradicating all criminals from Pyro after her best friend Kiyua Endicott was caught in the crossfire between rival gangs and killed. After leading multiple missions in the Pyro to hunt down outlaws, Hartford concluded that the only way to truly make the system safe would be to increase the viability of non-criminal settlements and attract commercial interests to the area. Over time, and with the backing of commercial enterprises, she believes that civilian interests will grow powerful enough to overpower Pyro's criminal element. Since then, Citizens for Pyro has been recruiting new members and raising funds to establish a major settlement on Bloom. Fire Rats. Okay. I think we're getting into like the gangs now. The Fire Rats are a criminal organization and religious cult based in the Pyro system. It originated in 2563 when a group of former Pyrotechnic Amalgamated workers found themselves abandoned on Bloom after their employer declared bankruptcy. Forced to eke out a living or perish, they took up residence in their former barracks. It is rumored that when resources began to run low, a large cargo ship that had been hit by a powerful solar flare crashed near the settlement, granting them a bounty of supplies. This is believed to be the origin of their reverence for Pyro's star and is especially violent solar activity. Today, the Fire Rats are known for shipjacking and for sporting scars from repeated, intentional exposure of solar flares. Love it. What is our next gang? Headhunters. And then it's like Headhunters, Rough and Ready, and then we do Checkmate Station. And then we'll be done with the Galactapedia update. The Headhunters are a major criminal organization based on the Pyro system that specializes in smuggling, theft, and protection. Originally from the Virgil system, my nose is itching the crap out of me. Give me 1 second, guys. There's a couple of things. I'm just going to be very transparent with you. Recording podcasts, and this is like, again, my 8th year of recording podcasts. There's 2 things that continuously happen, and I think most podcasters can relate. Like nose issues and throat issues. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, the throat issues make sense, right? So when you talk, especially if like an hour and a half of just non-straight talking, and you don't have like a partner to bounce conversation off with, your throat begins to tickle. And then as you like start talking and you get through like a Galactapedia update, it tickles to the point where you have to go on mute and cough. And again, it's easy to time that cough when you're bouncing it across another person. It's very difficult to do it when you're the only person. So you have to go on mute, have to give it a weird kind of, break in the conversation. For the nose piece, that really bothers me. So it might have to do with like I have a full out beard. So for those of you who have never seen the YouTube, I have a full beard, I have a mustache, I don't think any of the hair is like getting in my nose, but like as I'm talking, like I have this massive tickle in my nose. So my throat's tickling me, my nose is tickling me, and I'm trying to get through these articles. So classic podcasting dynamics. Welcome to the world of podcasts. You probably will never hear that from Joe Rogan. Because again, he bounces conversations off of somebody else. All right. Thanks for that caveat. Headhunters. The Headhunters are a major criminal organization based in the Pyro system that specializes in smuggling, theft, and protection, originally from the Virgil system. That's interesting. The gang first rose to prominence as smugglers in the 2610s when they established a fast shipping route from Virgil to Terra through Nyx and Pyro that proved to be difficult for authorities to detect. By the 2620s, they were fully relocated to Ruin Station, where they could more easily avoid encounters with the advocacy. It was during this era that they adopted the human skull into their symbolism and began including motifs of it in tattoos, personal decor, and graffiti. A location marked with a headhunter's skull warned other criminals that the area was under their control. Much of Pyro stayed under their influence until the criminal syndicate, the Drop Kings, challenged their authority in the 2740s in an effort to expand their smuggling network, resulting in a series of conflicts that caused control of Ruin Station to pass back and forth between the gangs for several decades. The Drop Kings ultimately withdrew when they clashed with another criminal syndicate in 2912. Since then, the gangs are officially on neutral terms, though they maintain a sense of rivalry. Rough and Ready. So a lot of people know about Rough and Ready. It's the R&R. It was on my CitizenCon t-shirt you saw in the last episode. It was all over. They marked or they tagged all of CitizenCon with the R&R. But Rough and Ready, it's a major criminal organization known for operating refueling stations throughout the Pyro system, founded by former headhunters enforcer Rook Gravis. In 2939, the gang's early focus was to pull back on active criminal activity and gain enough capital to do more than just survive. They conducted a series of meticulously planned raids on multiple refueling stations, taking them over and establishing themselves as the off-market version of Rest and Relax. That's really cool. I did not make that connection. Rough and Ready is the off-market version of Rest and Relax. Very cool. By the 2930s, the refueling stations have become a dominant force in Pyro. While they charge high prices, the protection they offer to those using the stations is considered worth the price. Likely in honor of their founder, chess pieces are a prominent part of their symbolism. Their major base of operations, Checkmate Station, is located near Monarch's Pyro 2. Last but not least, Checkmate Station. Here we go. Checkmate Station, formerly designated Pyam Farstat 2-4. Sure. Is a space station that orbits the star of the Pyro system in the L4 Lagrange point of Monarch's Pyro 2. Originally constructed as a resupply satellite for workers on Monarchs, it was abandoned when Pyrotechnic Amalgamated went out of business in 2563. Various outlaw gangs have laid claim to it, sometimes changing the station's name to reflect who controls it. Currently, the Rough and Ready gang are in charge and are responsible for its current moniker. The group allows travelers through Pyro to stop at Checkmate Station to refuel their ships, purchase supplies, and indulge in entertainment. There you go. Like I said, Pyro is the news of this week. I had no problem. Usually I'll do like a summary. I'll talk about the 20 short articles and say like, here are some highlights, some things that you might want to pull out or gain, from this intel drop. But again, Pyro is the conversation last week into this week, and will probably be the conversation going into IAE. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you're listening to the podcast, driving somewhere, you now have all the information that everybody else does when it comes to Pyro. Quickly. So CIG partnered with JRDF and released the Dragonfly photos from Saturday and Sunday. Here is my ugly mug from that show, or from that opportunity. Ignore me on the bike. Look at the rest of it. Like, this was remarkable. It's the same Dragonfly that they've been using in previous sitcons, but they take it apart into pieces, they reassemble it per sitcon, and then they paint it to accommodate or to look like the the sitcom theme. So this, if you go to JRDF's socials, or if you go to CIG socials in the past, it shows them putting it together in painting. They did such an amazing job making this look like Pyro. You've got gang tags, so right at the I guess the Drake logo, you've got that tag there. On the bottom left, or in the back left, you've got Burnin' Pyro, which is that very common phrase that you see kind of all around all the stations, Burnin' Pyro. So I thought that was really cool. Wanted to share that piece. Let's quickly go through kind of the rest of this. The PTU, starting like yesterday, the PTU is now in patch 321.1. And so wanted to share the patch notes with you, or at least the testing focus of patch 321.1. Again, in the PTU. This is not the persistent universe. It's the public test universe. So the testing focus, system security ship trespass, that's going to be in the game very soon, but it is right now in the PTU. The mission defend data heist, the new player experience, which is in New Babbage, the vehicle headlight refactor. That's that word that I keep failing at, refactor, and the Crusader C1 Spirit. So the Crusader C1 Spirit, that was exciting to see. Again, I'm surprised it didn't come out kind of around the same time as the A1, because the cargo loop is, I mean, you just have to have the space. There's not really anything that needs to happen. Like the A1, you need missiles to go in there, you need missiles to drop. It's a whole, loop in and of itself. But the C1 should just be a cargo experience. Anyways, it is being released in 321.1. The features in partial state, the tractor beam is going to be tested in the PTU as well, but that also brings up the Argo SRV, right? The Argo SRV is slated to come out very soon as well. Also, the Siege of Orison global event reactivation, and then the FPS AI behavior integration. There's the known issues, not going to go through it. New features, the system security ship trespass, data heist mission, and those two vehicles, the Argo SRV and the C1 Spirit. Feature updates, you have an AI update gameplay, the tractor beam. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. UGF ledge cover navigation improvement polish pass, so underground facilities got a little bit of a touch up. And then I will say, this is Tumbril Nova. I will say that in the roadmap, it's not the roundup, what is it, the roadmap features, what's it called? I'm just going to go to it. Comlink, no, development roadmap in the release view. So in the release view, you guys are seeing my beautiful mind work real time here. So in the release view for 321, you've got vehicle tractor beams committed for 321. You've got, here's your ship trespass, data heist, but the ships and vehicles also talk about the Tumbril Storm. This is what I wanted to call out. So the Tumbril Storm is also committed for 321. It's not part of the PTU 321.1. It's not part of that. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was kind of this preview into 322, right? So here, this is like fairly new, but the characters player hair update, right? So that's going to be exciting going into 322. Player hair updates, Wither's beards. Yes. Beyond the Verse was right yet again. Beards should be down the pipeline before the end of the year. Gameplay, salvage structural, transform large chunks of metal from salvaged ships into refinable material. That's going to be huge. Inventory cargo containers. And then here's your ships and vehicles. Check this out, guys. All right, 322, before the end of the year, we're going to see the Apoa Centauri, right? And then you've got to have the X1 and its variants. So the Origin X1, which is like the speeder bike, the Origin X1, the X1 Velocity, and the X1 Force. So I wanted to give you that little preview into 322 as well. Whew, that was a lot of information, and I hope it was good information for you. Again, usually I try to summarize to keep the conversation going, to keep it engaging, but there's something about the Pyro Galactapedia I wanted to cover every single one of it. It's the first time we're getting a new system than Stanton. So I did want to give it its due diligence. But again, I hope this finds everybody well. Thank you for joining us on episode 31. Next week, episode 32, we're going to be getting into IAE, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. It's also getting into Veterans Day. So I'll be guest hosting or guest starring on Tree's Armchair Admiral and Generals podcast Sunday night, November the 12th. To like celebrate Veterans Day and whatnot. So you can see me there as well. But you've been listening to Beyond the Verse Star Citizen podcast. You can get involved in the conversation with your questions, comments, concerns, and emotional outbursts by emailing us at contact@beyondtheversehq.com or interacting with our Spotify Q&A or polls at the end of each episode over at Spotify. Join our in-game organization. We talked about the importance of that going into Pyro. You can join us at Soul Provision by applying at www.robertspaceindustriescom/provision. And then all of our socials are /BTV_cast. Once again, thank you for joining us. We hope this finds you well. And until next time, safe travels as you traverse beyond the verse. Take care, everybody.